This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, iZotope, Native Instruments, Empirical Labs, Soundporter Mastering, and Trace Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through custom Trace Audio cables and the new Empirical Labs pump compressor mixed through iZotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, Nectar, and Plasma, all mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I'm actually probably about 75% therapist and 25% producer. If they have a half-written song, we got to talk about what's going on in your life. And then we can kind of sometimes find something and I can go, oh, I heard a quote the other day that was about this. Or, you know what, that was a cool thing you just said. What if we said this, I think that the best thing that can happen is for artists to be artists and live kind of storied lives while they're young, so they have something to talk about.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects, perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and AI-enhanced iZotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Empirical Labs, creators of the famous Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio pros. The Fatso adds warmth to digital recordings with harmonic generation, tape emulation, and compression. The Pump, a 500 series compressor, features 8 selectable ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, and an attack mod for incredible transient control. The Arouser and Big Freak plugins are also available at empiricallabs.com, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Brennan Aerts, a producer, writer, and musician who has worked extensively in film, television, and ads since 2010 in Los Angeles, California, and Nashville, Tennessee, where he is now. He owns a music house called Bird Nest Int'l and has produced music content for every major network, as well as multiple national ad campaigns, movies, and artists. He's also a member of the bands Vinyl Pinups and the Werewolves, and recent credits include artists like Moon Taxi, Than Ezra, and Devon Gilfilian, to name just a few. I said that right. A big shout out and a thank you to Jay Tooke, who has also been on the podcast previously, so please check that out, and for making our introduction. So please welcome Brennan Aerts to Recording Studio Rockstars. Brennan, are you ready to rock, dude?
Let's rock.
Glad to have you here. Here we are in the in-person podcast studio, which we've been desperately trying to name on the show here.
Well, I name everything Bird Nest, so the problem is that this feels a little bit like a bird nest. Maybe it's like an eagle's nest.
There, I like that. The eagle's nest, the pod nest.
The pod nest. The eagle's
There's
pod.
a lot of bird nests around my house, usually.
So it feels pretty
find
reasonable.
them on lamps and other places in nooks. We've been running with Pod Damn It as one of them. I think that came in from Chris Shaw. And then, Ready to Rock Studios is a good one because that's just how we started. But also after recent movie outings, I was kind of running with Podzilla too.
Oh man, I like that. You know, the thing about it is it feels like such a tower up here that I want to incorporate something like that into it. You know?
Pod Tower.
The castle, the pod castle.
The pod castle.
Castle.
The pod father.
I don't know.
Rockstars, drop a comment in and let us know what we should roll with.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be good to know. So, Brennan, great to have you here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's and thanks to Jay for sending me this way because I love these things. I'm a heavy consumer of podcasts, and I'm just now getting to be on them. So,
when do you actually do your podcast consumption?
In the car. It's only in the car, or if I'm going for a run a lot. Like, I think a lot of musicians, the older we get, the more we're using our ears for work all day.
Yeah.
And you can't hit the road and go listen to, Downward Spiral on 11 in your ears and then come home and do work. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I used to enjoy, I'll still do some music on road trips, but I just don't last all that long. And I remember when I was younger, I'd try to rock out on a 6-hour drive somewhere, and then your head's just fried at some point,
No, you get too worn out. You can listen to like long instrumental ambient music maybe, but then that'll put you to sleep. So podcasts are so engaging, and it's so I love knowledge. And so I think what's awesome about all of them is that you can learn so much and see the world in so many different ways and kind of learn about new people and new things to research and find new inspiration out there that is like not just doom scrolling on the internet and not just gear hunting and not just reading the news, which is most of what we tend to use the internet for. So,
well, for me, particularly in the 90s, the internet was, when you say gear hunting, it just reminds me of a whole chapter where I was working nonstop. I mean, if I was working on a record, then it was 7 days a week, every waking hour. And every time you took a break, we didn't even have cell phones yet. So you just like busted out your laptop and you just browse eBay for gear.
Oof, baby. Old school eBay.
Yeah.
That was it, man. That was the thing. I think I bought a Joe Satriani Ibanez off of eBay when I was like 14 years old. That was like my eBay purchase.
And then the big, it's funny when I was showing you the studio, you mentioned something about a particular pedal that you said you learned about from Steve Albini.
Yeah, it's the harmonic percolator. It's only really it was a secret for a long time, and not a secret, but and now there's a lot of companies, specifically Land Devices. I think a few years ago they came out with a new version of it, and now everybody knows about it and talks about it and loves it, and it's very easy to get one of their pedals and whatnot. But back in the day, you'd have to scour eBay for those weird old fuzz pedals and things that might show up broken. They might be a different pedal in the same box or something. But it was a good hunt, and that and Craigslist. Craigslist was a really good one for a long time.
Yeah, I found some good things on Craigslist. I got my plate reverb off Craigslist.
Goodness.
Years ago, I had to drive down to Alabama to go get it.
Yeah, man. You got to take a friend, make sure that, make sure it's like all legit. The big joke all the time was that Craigslist had a storefront in the Guitar Center parking lot at Thompson Lane in Nashville, because that's just where you met to sell gear.
Right, because everybody knew where it was if you were doing music gear.
Exactly. And if it was sketchy, everybody'd know where you were.
So one of the as well, I'll circle back to this, but we were working with Steve Albini up at Electrical.
Wow.
And so, we were hanging out for enough days to have enough moments where he'd talk about stuff that wasn't related to our session. But he'd tell us about gear that was cool, and then we'd go find it on the internet. But one of the great takeaways is he told me about, I think it was Steve who told me this. He said, the trick for eBay is e-snipe back then. So you'd learn about like why wait around for the final hour of the auction and have to keep going back and visit it. You just like go to this other site and link it up, and then you'd put in how much you really wanted to pay for it, and then it would just it just like zip in there at the last 6 seconds and try and place your offer, and you hope you get it.
That was, man, such a rush though. Like the real auctions when you're just like refresh. Like you're just going crazy, like trying to hit that thing. It's,
it's like you get the double hit from buying gear. You get the hit from buying new gear, but you also get the hit from like winning the buy.
Oh yeah. It's and it kind of like, I mean, they always had a reserve price, of course. But the second that it started, the second they put in buy it now, I think everybody kind of lost the thrill.
Yeah,
it's like, it's just a store now.
Yeah. But still a good one.
For sure.
And then, then you kind of hit the family stage. I don't know whether that happened for you, but for me, all of a sudden I had enough stuff for the studio. And then it's like family means I can't just spend money on studio gear.
Yeah. So gear for me is like it's like a rotating savings account. Like, and it has, I will say like mine has not been deposited to in a moment. It is kind of like, okay, here's the gear. And if you need something, you have to sell something.
Right.
And if you sell that, you don't use that money for groceries or watches or cars or gas or tuition. That goes back into, the gear.
Into the gear.
Yeah. So it's kind of this rolling fund. And, if you're lucky enough to get anything that appreciates, which happens sometimes by accident and sometimes on purpose, then you can kind of, leverage it into other things. But
did you find any good ways to sell stuff today? Yeah, or recently? Like, do you have a way? Like, if you were going to sell something tomorrow, you'd be like, I'm going.
I always go Facebook Marketplace because I don't ship, and we live in a town loaded with musicians, and a town that's kind of transient, people that pass through all the time. So I almost always can move something on Facebook Marketplace, and there's no fees, and you meet the person, and you get the cash, and that's what it is.
And you still go over to the Guitar Center parking lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's been a little different lately. I think I met a guy at Target a couple weeks ago to sell a match list to him.
Nice.
It's like it was kind of like here, and again, like I don't even know. I couldn't tell you if I could have made more money on it or not. I really don't know. But I know that it was easy. And I know that there were no fees and there was no shipping and there's none of that. So
yeah, that's a good reminder. Just, I mean, the cool thing about that is there's no extra fees. You just use it and
I will say for guitars, I love Carter. Because
I was just there recently.
Dude, I mean, they have great stuff. It's all accessible. It's very inviting there.
It's particularly, it's all used or vintage.
Yeah, vintage and used stuff. They might have new custom shop stuff. I don't know if they have it there. I don't know if it came from other people or if it comes from Fender or Gibson directly. But in general, it's just a really warm place, and a lot of people go through there, and the exposure is really good. If you're trying to sell like a Telecaster or whatever, you can just go over there and it's gonna get looked at. Yeah, it's gonna get seen, and it's gonna get played, and somebody can bond with it and take it out of there. And it's a little easier than shipping on Reverb and all this kind of stuff.
Right, so, totally. And then so you can actually bring your stuff
consignment. You can consign through them. Cool. They have good consignment, and they'll buy too. But you're gonna lose a lot of money on stuff that way. But
are you aware whether rock stars listening to this might actually consider contacting them if they want to do consignment and ship it to Carter's to be consigned?
They do that, yeah.
Do they really?
Absolutely, yeah. They do the whole thing
for you.
They do the whole thing. I really, I haven't done much with Gruen, but I've done stuff with Carter, and I've loved them. They've been fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice being in a place where we have such great guitar stores, because I've been out looking at guitars recently, and I still have fun going into a Guitar Center, or I went into Sam's.
Yeah.
I don't like having to ask somebody to unlock the thing so I can play the one guitar that maybe even playable.
Right.
But going into places like Gruen's, Gruen guitars, and pulling off the guitars off the wall and playing them, and they're just like, everyone is just so playable.
Yeah.
It's set up. It sounds great. The room is perfect. All that kind of stuff. I love it.
Man, I really think we're living in Nashville right now. I think we're just in the guitar mecca of the world right now. It's not only the guitars, but the guitar players, guitar culture, like so many of the most influential players and even the new up and comers, like the YouTubers and the kids in the, maybe not the metal bands quite as much, but in general, just guitar nuts. It is a guitar town, man. And I grew up here and of course there were always guitars, there were always, it's guitar player thing, but like, we didn't have like Joe Bonamassa rolling up and sitting in at the Underdog, or whoever, like we didn't have just A-list session guys like blasting through Gruen to just see what's going on, and collectors from all over the world bringing the most iconic guitars into, Gibson or wherever, I don't know. It's kind of it's a wild place to live right now like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool when you get to run into some people here. And I mean, like Underdog you mentioned is a club just up the street from me in East Nashville. And,
Sheesh, man.
And in my book, it's kind of it's a new club.
Yeah.
And I've been there before and it was fun. I need to go out more. I'm trying to get my ass out of the house.
Man, I'm not. I mean, I got little ones too, but I mostly watch it all from afar, and I had worked with a band years ago and the owner of the Underdog has these like warehouses and it was during COVID, we set up their radio tour, remote radio tour in one of his warehouses. And I got to know him and dude, he's a hustler. He just loves the scene and he wants to serve it and make it a thing. And so I don't know. It's a great little club over there.
And then there's a place called the Bowery Vault, which I just went to a show at, and it's a little upstairs writer's room place with a cool stage and a tiny little place with a tiny bar. And it felt so great. And the music was so good. And the songwriters were it was four guitars and singers up there. And one of them was Carl Tatz, who designed my studio.
No way.
And he was amazing. He was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. I'd heard that he was doing music out there, but I hadn't seen him do his thing, and I was blown away.
I hadn't even known that he did music like that.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
It's funny. He's such a legend.
Just a rumor, yeah. But my takeaway was just seeing how great the songwriters were, and listening to that, and being reminded that in Nashville, the true appreciation here for the song.
Yeah, I got to tell you, man, in the new music business, where it's I don't need to say anything everybody doesn't already know, which is that there is so much music out there, and there's so many songs. Or so many tracks and so many records coming out. I mean, at the end of the day, they say it, they've always said it, and now it's more true than ever, is that the song is the king, man.
Yeah.
The song is the only thing that matters for whatever reason. Whatever you're writing, if it's to express yourself or to make somebody else feel seen or to make somebody else feel something and listen to it and go, that's me. Whatever it is, or to catch their attention or to make them feel energized or whatever you're trying to accomplish, it's like you have to pay attention to the skeleton of that. I sit there with young artists especially, you sit there for a second and they'll go like, oh man, I got this idea for this like drum part. And I'm like, okay, we'll get there, But you have to kind of consistently go like, let's make sure that this is interesting in a room like the Bowery, that where you can sit here and play this on an acoustic guitar and somebody cares about it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's a country song. That doesn't mean, it just means that it can live like that,
Well, and it's an interesting thing. I'm glad you bring that up because your discography is so production friendly.
Oof.
So it's cool to hear you talk about how it starts with the song and thinking about that. And then, there's still room to find that cool production element that makes you go like, those loops, those drums, that's what a great
totally,
sound,
man. Yeah, it's thank you, first of all. It's I think that like I'm even just saying I do these little quick videos on Instagram and stuff, and I'm just telling you the things I tell myself. It's like it took me a while to learn that, which was, when I was 25, 26, I was really focused on the drum sounds and how am I going to get this to sound good, and like why do my tracks sound like crap, and like all the compared to a big record, and I need to spend hours on Pensato's place learning how to mix and all these kinds of things. And dude, sure enough, that all matters, but still at the end of the day, like if nobody cares about what you're saying or how you're saying it, it doesn't matter how cool your drums are.
Now, luckily, since you got all that songwriting nonsense out of the way already.
Yeah.
And you've got great songs. We get to, on this podcast, talk about all the nerdy stuff too. And how'd you
Heck
get
yeah,
those
man.
drums
Let's do
sound
that.
so good,
I
which is
love
fun.
that. I love it.
Give us a little bit of background into, your story. Give us the brief arc of your journey from getting interested in music and landing here in Nashville with this great discography.
Yeah, I was born here. I grew up in the music business. So my dad was a producer and a songwriter. And so I grew up, the second I got my first guitar, I was about 12. And I was like, okay, well, now I care about music a lot and records and all those kinds of things. And I wasn't really into Nashville music necessarily, but my dad was working, so I could dip in, so I'd go with my dad to the studio.
Because you
all
were
the
here
time.
in Nashville growing up.
Yeah. So my dad, and again, the 90s, that was like middle-class musician, you know what I mean? Like there were demo sessions, there were, every level of like the biggest records and the smallest records and the independent records, and then the, these demo sessions where they were kind of records. So my dad was always working, so I'd always go with him. And in my head, that's how the studio worked, was number charts and studio musicians and songs. And
yeah, it's cool to hear you describe that too, because it's a reminder to me that the 90s was a really great middle of, like, there were still all these big studios doing big studio production. There was still the big master session production going on in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And there was the demo studios like County Q and places like that would just
Texana, Omnisound, RIP.
Yeah. Just like you said, like musicians just playing their asses off, cranking out songs. But it was also the introduction of the small and home studio. So it was the ADAT era where you could start like Alex the Great, where I started, and Robin and Brad, outfitted a studio. We had a tape machine, but we had a Mackie console and we had ADATs, and that's mostly what we used, for a lot of those records. And then on top of all that, it was the resurgence of, indie rock. It wasn't even the resurgence. It was like I'd guess I described the 80s as the birth of indie rock, and the 90s was the birth of indie rock got, graduated to major record labels.
Right.
And was just getting swept up, and money was thrown around and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, my dad, he's been very successful, but he was not, he didn't have 100 million number ones or anything like that. And he raised our family and took care of us, and we grew up and went to decent schools, and it was like just from the grind of the middle class music business, And then of course, in the early aughts, it was really cool in Nashville because of the indie rock thing that was kind of hitting critical mass, with the Kings of Leon, of course, and the whole 12th and Porter scene, freaking Cage the Elephant, those boys, and the Luna Halo boys, the Barlow brothers came to town and showed us how to party. It was a cool time, to grow up here. But the long and short, I grew up in the music business with my dad.
Is your dad Billy?
Huh?
Your dad?
Huh? My dad?
Yeah.
His name's Billy?
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's what I just said. Yeah, okay.
How did you? Yeah.
I just looked it up.
Oh, okay. Got it. I was like,
because I didn't know your backstory. No, it's great.
No,
but then when you responded, I was like, "Oops, I just said the wrong name. I'm gonna have to."
No, I was actually more surprised. It's like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it shows right up under Sound Better, Billy Aerts.
There he is. Yeah. So, went to business school at Lipscomb. And I was always playing in bands and making music and stuff, but I was so enamored with kind of the business of it. Yeah. And I had seen, I had watched Dan Huff. That was a big one. I had watched Dan Huff go from studio musician to producer. And I'd always wanted to be a producer. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to, and the type of producer that was the producer back then, which is the guy standing in the back telling everybody what to do and with the good ideas and all this, didn't ever think I'd touch a fader, So I saw him do that. So I said, well, I'll do that. So that's, when I got out of college, I was just like, I'm going to be a guitar player. And I was hanging out with guitar players, and I was hanging out with studio guys, and like, doing the grind on the road, with little bands that nobody's ever heard of, and playing in the studios as much as I could. And I was good, but I wasn't as good as they were. Todd Lombardo, Justin Ostrander, Devin Malone, like these guys are just these incredible guitar players, and they had come to town to be guitar players, and it was very obvious that they were kind of graduating.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wasn't, because I was so much more interested in production.
Yeah.
So when I was about probably 24, 25, I was like, all right, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not like I'm not going to play guitar, but I'm going to go ahead and do production, and I'm going to wait tables, and I'm going to try and find bands that let me produce them. So,
well, the funny thing about, we talk about this on the show, but people will say, oh, I play guitar, I came to Nashville, but I don't call myself a guitar player here. And I sort of like to push back on that. It's like, I hate hearing about people like letting go of their ownership of being a musician. Cause the truth is there's more of us out here in the world than there are the greats of anything,
Yeah.
But what's cool to think about it in the way you're talking about it too, is just this reminder of, we don't have to be, a Joe Satriani or Joe Bonamassa or, one of these top players to be able to contribute great guitar to great recordings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was where I really started to go down that road and find more of at least who I was in high school was when I decided to stop that kind of pursuit of being a hired guitar player. And that's where I got really into, the Kills, and got back into Queens of the Stone Age, and just getting into like fuzz guitar and like bad guitar sounds. You know what
tones,
I mean? Yeah.
Like a pursuit of tones.
Yeah. And energy and like attitude and all those kinds of things. So what happened was like, nobody's going to let a 25-year-old kid without hit records produce their rock band. So you just got to start your own. And so I joined a band called 1,000 Horses. And we had a really great thing happen. We toured around. We were just wild men, and we got signed by Interscope, by Jeff Sosnow at Interscope.
What year was that?
That would have been like 2010, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, 2010. So I was about 2 or 3 years out of college then.
Yeah,
something like that. And we did that, and then they all went home for the holidays. And while all the paperwork was getting done, my wife and I decided to do a side project because we were sitting at home, and I just did the tracks on my computer, and we made it. My wife's an amazing songwriter and singer, and
is that the Vinyl Pinups?
That's the Vinyl Pinups.
Right on, on.
So that was Vinyl Pinups, and somehow or another, it made its way to Monty Lipman at Universal Republic, and Monty called my wife on her telephone, on her mobile phone, and he was like, "Hey, this is Monty Lipman from Universal Republic Records," and she's like, "Who?" She's like, "Who are you?" Right? And at the time, they were a label that was just scooping up whatever they could find and going like, let's see what'll happen with it. They write nobody off. This is this brand new thing. We were like, we don't even have a website, man. He was like, I don't care. Love the music. It's great. And labels, of course, it's not that streaming wasn't happening, but there were still, CDs and all those kind of things. So we got signed to them. I left 1,000 Horses to do that. And that was the Vinyl Pinups. And shortly after that, we moved to LA and we just kept doing what we were doing, which is, making tracks on a iMac in the living room and kind of seeing what could happen from it. So, it was kind of a neat trajectory to kind of go like, we were just always a DIY band. And it was because it was necessity, really more or less. The label was like, deliver us something, we gave you an advance, that's your budget.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
it's cool. So, you guys always had a pretty simple studio setup. Do you remember discovering things like, oh shit, we can rent a vocal mic, in the chain just for when we need it in our apartment or wherever?
Yeah, the big thing that when I found, first of all, when I found a Black Lion interface, I was all about just hearing things. So I had a Black Lion interface and I had ProAct Studio 100s in a living room because I was like, listen, it doesn't matter where we are. If I can't hear it, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So, and then we did everything in the box. I mean, I was using the SansAmp plugin for my guitar sounds because I didn't have mics or good mic pre's. I couldn't use amps. We were in apartments, you know. Certainly amp plugins at the time were not what they are now.
So is that how you learned to play laid back, is through latency?
Yeah, exactly. Seriously. I never thought it was that bad, but I don't know. We figured it out. But
I think sometimes if you start out with certain tools, that's just the way the world is. You don't think about it. You just figure out how to do it.
Absolutely. And I'll tell everybody, man. It's like I got a bunch of Waves plug-in cracks at the time, and I've since bought all of them.
Yeah,
I always make sure everybody knows
story.
that. Yeah, but I was like, at the time, my justification was really like, I don't make any money on music, so how can I pay for tools? Yeah. But I will say that, like, God, what a time to grow up, because I could learn how to use, man, I remember the first time I just turned on a CLA 1176 on the vocal and going like, oh, that's what that's supposed to sound like. That's how you get that sound. And then, of course, then we get real nitty gritty and we're like, no, I like this 1176 better, and so on. But yeah, it was really like we were just making stuff with what we had, because that's what you do.
Do you sometimes feel like you have an advantage by learning entirely kind of in the box?
Absolutely.
So then you know how to make sounds leap out of the speakers.
Oh man, I say it all
that way, as opposed to like if you had learned in a real studio first and then you were trying to figure out how to redo that in the box or anything like that.
Dude, I say it all the time. You can't blow up a plugin. You can't fry it or plug it into the wrong thing. You can't turn the knob up too high. You do whatever you do whatever you want, Your
speakers could be turned up too high.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm saying, it's like you don't have to maintain it. You don't have to call a guy if you're like, this doesn't sound right today. And especially when you're young, if you're not an engineer, which I was not, I still wouldn't consider myself an engineer, but like your ears aren't really tuned yet. So you need to be able to kind of mess shit up a little bit. What I mean?
Someone asked me a while back, do you fear AI will one day replace you as a mastering engineer? Well, it hasn't yet. That's because algorithms don't listen to music or to clients. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. When I master, I experience the music as your fans will, with the honesty of fresh ears. And unlike AI, I master with your intentions in mind, not merely to process the mix and boost the levels. If you want an experienced live engineer to master your music as only a human can, find me at soundporter.com.
Sick of searching for the right cable or wondering how to hook up your studio? Trace Audio has you covered. Based in Nashville but serving studios everywhere, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, patch bay labels, and wiring solutions for home and pro studios. Try out the free online custom patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com to easily color code, label, and organize your XLR or quarter-inch bays, which are popular with home studios. It's sleek, professional, and simple to use. Then use the code RSR15 for 15% off printing and shipping your custom patch bay labels to take your studio to the next level. I agree with that. I think that's one of the first things I try and tell anybody who's new-ish to try and figuring out how to use certain plugins. I'm like, as soon as you get something, and there's a knob that goes from 1 to 100 or whatever, don't go between 46 and 48 wondering what's the difference in the sound. Just like turn that knob all the way down and turn it all the way up and listen for it and see if you can hear what's going on, and then start figuring it out,
Yeah, man. Middle. If it sounds good, it is good.
Right, but the problem is like when you start out, everything sounds bad too. Sometimes.
Yeah, true.
Well, sometimes things just sound good too.
Yeah. I find that like I would do exactly that. I'd turn it up all the way and then like back it off.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's where it needs to be. I guess,
when once your ears learn what to listen for, then you enter the stage of fooling yourself where you're working on the plugin and then you realize, oh shit, I just undid the bass mix as I thought I was getting the vocals dialed in.
Yeah, man. It's God, the amount of mistakes where you're like, oh man, what was I? Sometimes it works, right? Like sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't know I was turning that knob on that instrument, and wow, it turned out sounding cool. I'll leave that.
Or you're like, or hopefully you get to the point where you're like, you realize that you weren't making any change at all, and then you're like, well, maybe it's just okay. Maybe it's fine.
Yeah,
I don't
maybe.
need to do anything.
Yeah. You're turning faders or you're turning knobs on the wrong fader, and you're like, man, it sounds better. I can hear it. And then you're like, oh wait, I wasn't actually tweaking the bass at all. I was tweaking the muted, sitar track.
The muted ocarina track. So sometimes I ask people on the podcast to share an inspirational quote or mention somebody that really inspired you, in music, creativity, or songwriting. Man. Does anything or anybody come to mind for you right off the top of your head? Oof. And if it's me, that's okay. You can just say,
I know. This is one that's actually not about creativity, but it leads to something. And, Rick Rubin said, never let your dreams undermine your ability to take care of yourself. And that I have seen, that behavior has hurt so many artists for a number of reasons. For me, when I was young, I was so bent on not having a job that I worked on a lot of bad music that I didn't believe in. I had no real pathway as long as it meant that I didn't have to wait tables or whatever.
Right.
As long as I could tell everybody I was making money in the music industry, like it mattered. And I wasted a lot of years doing that.
You were going to die on the job sword.
Totally. Just like, oh my God, like I need to make sure that that everybody knows that I'm a musician. It's the ego thing, And I think that there's a lot of people over time, and that becomes this really, it's good to hustle, dude. It's good to grind, but it's like this, if you need to focus on what you're trying to accomplish here, and you need to have a clear head to create and make good decisions, not only about your career moves, but about what you're making and why you're making it, where you want to end up. And if you're clouded by needing that $55 from playing guitar for some, garbage act that you had to learn 100 of their songs for. And I know this is pretentious sounding, but it's really real, because the second that I was able to go, okay, I don't need that anymore. Like I was able to create things that at least moved the needle and impacted my career in a way to where, oh, now I'm actually headed in a direction. I'm not just pecking around here anymore.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that you were willing to take on some work that was not studio related so that you could pay bills, so that you could focus more on let me just get this one production really great?
Yeah. And it was okay. Even there's a limit to how much kind of, garbage work. I hate to call it that. It sounds like I'm being a jerk or something, but there's a limit to how much of that I can take on right now.
Right.
And even now I'm at the point where that continues to echo in my head, where I go like, I can't be so bent on some kind of commitment I had to myself at 15 years old that I'm not taking care of myself and my family anymore. And I think that creating a life, designing a life where you have the space to do that is really important,
I think for me, it was holding on to that fantasy of overdoing it in the studio was the right move. It's kind of like, like if you're not smoking so many cigarettes that you become a cigarette, you're not cool or whatever, It's like, it was that idea of the studio being like, wake up and go to the studio, and then like you eat because you got to eat, and then you just keep making it until you collapse,
Mm-hmm.
And you just do that every day, and thinking that was really cool, but eventually realizing, it wasn't moving the needle,
right?
And we had zero perspective, and we weren't really finishing a record.
Yeah, man. There's a little bit of like, you kind of have to like realize we are artists, and you kind of got to be a little hippy dippy about it, which is tough as producers, and especially producers nowadays that have our hands on every single aspect of it. It's really easy to like not let yourself be kind of like type B for a second. But dude, that's where the kind of magic stuff comes from. You know what I mean? It's where you're kind of like, you're chilling out for a second, or you're going, you have to be one thing I always say is it's okay to not have the answer right now. It's okay to go, that vocal's not working. This sound isn't working. This mix is not there. I don't know what it is, but it's not there yet. And we need to maybe walk away or take a walk. And you know, like, you don't want to be the guy that says everything sucks and has no good ideas. But sometimes you're just sitting there, you're going, man, I don't know. Just not happening right now.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that, I think. And that's, again, that's that like type, you just kind of got to be kind of hippy dippy about it and go walk down the beach or something.
Yeah. You got to get the perspective.
Yeah.
That was so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like, leaving the 24/7 record making and starting my home studio here and just saying, I'm not going to chase the gold ring of the major label. I'm just going to work with independent musicians and, just try and have a balance to life and everything. I started making better records. I started doing better work, more variety. It moved the needle, everything, more money.
Yeah. You have that amazing studio out back that's actually a beautiful, wonderful place to sit and hang out.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, that's took
a minute to get there, but
that's a win, man. That's a real win. So,
yeah. Although I will say, one of the things I did appreciate about the band when we would do the 24/7 stuff, the artists in particular that I worked with, is when I was engineering and he'd walk in, he'd just go like, that sucks.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember at the time I was like, that's great. Actually, like, so I don't have to I don't have to keep turning knobs on this. We'll just bail and dump it. And go to something else.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
So sometimes it's good to have some like harsh criticism in the studio too.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I was, years ago, I had a friend who was in a band and Eric Valentine was doing their record. And I was in LA at the same, this was before I moved there, but I was in LA at the same time as him. He's like, come down to the studio, come and hang out. And that was kind of a mixture of both of what we're talking about. It was kind of like an around the clock grind, but barefoot in LA, it's huge. It's got an apartment where the band's living and playing video games, and Eric's walking around with no shoes on, and it's kind of like you're in this crazy studio where you're doing such high level stuff, but it's really not that intense, And he was the guy that'd be like, this didn't work. Let's order some sushi and go sit in the live room and kind of talk about something other than music for a little bit.
That's funny. Yeah, I got a chance to work with him too, and it was the same band, and we were camped out in the band's parents' basement. We had put together a home studio in St. Louis, of all places.
No way.
And he came out and spent like 4 days with us, and did a session with us, and
that's
he
incredible.
would do like watch him work, and he would do stuff like he'd be like, we need a bridge here, and I got an idea for a reverse guitar, harmonized guitar part. And next thing you know, I'm watching him just like, bend the computer through the fourth dimension. He's like taking Pro Tools to other dimensions. And then it comes back and he's got this whole, Hendrix reverse guitar part.
Good Lord, man, he's wild.
And it was great. And then when he took a break, I'd be like, I'd work hard, but then I'd really need a break. I'd need to eat. I'd need to go exercise some.
Yeah.
And he took a break and he just went up there and he just like quietly poured out. I hope you don't mind me sharing this story.
Yeah, please.
He quietly like pours out some olive oil and some like spices and whatever onto a little dipping plate. And then just sat there and methodically like ate a loaf of bread and just like dipped it and had it. It was just like, I don't know, something cool about it.
That's it, man.
They went back into the studio and kept going.
That's it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so you did the LA thing for a while, and then came back here. One of the things, you talked about starting your bands, but one of the things you did is Bird Nest International, and you've been doing a lot of production for film, for television, for ad campaigns. Tell us that story, and what's the difference between that and doing band stuff? Man,
a lot. Well, so when we got to LA, I loved it. I loved LA. I think we caught LA at a really magic time. When we moved there was like the bands like The Neighborhood were like doing residencies at the Bootleg, and I think Lana Del Rey was the biggest artist in the world at the time. And she was very cool, and like there's all these really neat records coming out. I think that which There's a Jay-Z record that Timbaland did.
On like 99 Problems or something?
No, it was later than that. It was the one that had Tom Ford on it. There, and Kanye's records were really cool. There was just so much cool stuff going on. There was indie bands that, obviously Justin Meldal Johnson, huge hero of mine. He had just made the M83 record there. And so it was a great place to be, creatively. The scene was really good. It was still actually kind of affordable when we were there. And the second I got there, I was just like, how do I get going? You know what I mean?
What time is this? Was this before the 2010 time?
This would have been after this. Yeah, this would have been like 2011.
Okay.
Late 2011, early 2012.
Nice.
And I was at a party with a friend, and I met a music supervisor at NBC, and we just hit it off. We're still very good friends, and we were into like very cool bands. He's an amazing producer himself. He was in a cool band. Like, it was just like, it was a neat scene where he was kind of like, he was doing, he was a supervisor, and then he was also in these bands. And at the time, it was like, film and TV and sync was starting to become a big way for not only bands to get exposure, but also a cool way for people to make a living making music that was hip and cool. You know what I mean? Along the way, while they're building their bands or, whatever. So for us, at the time, we were done with Republic, and we were independent. And, we had another friend that was a manager at Ingrooves, which is a distribution company. So we said, okay, let's just start this little company so we can put out our own records. We'll have some marketing behind it a little bit. And then we'll make the records, and we can make everything. I was at the point I was like, well, I'm doing everything myself. So I'll just make everything myself. And then we can pitch for TV and film syncs. And that really kind of took very fast. It was surprising, as somebody, any of us in the music industry know that you just wait and wait and wait. And it happened really fast. So I said, I might be onto something here. Maybe this is something I'm good at, And so I just kept doing it. And that same supervisor introduced me to a bunch of different music houses. So I started producing, they'd say, hey, we've got this like Verizon ad, and they don't want lyrics. They just need music, but they needed to, have like a cool indie vibe, and they'd name off like 10 bands that the people liked or whatever. And I'd go, okay, well, let's try and make something that sounds like that. Sometimes they'd send picture, sometimes they wouldn't. And so I kind of just got involved with like, okay, I'm doing custom instrumental stuff that sounds like indie bands. It wasn't, it's kind of what's become library music, I guess. But at the time it was more direct. And then I've got my own band, and then I'm working with other kind of artists and producers and singers and stuff, independent people in LA. At the time, there were just amazing artists just like running around Silver Lake, like, drinking coffee at
This was at
Intelligentsia.
Spaceland was still there.
Big time. Like Spaceland. Yeah. It was just, you'd meet these people through parties or whatever, and they're like, well, they don't have a record yet, but they got a cool voice and they make a cool record. Well, let's just make something in my living room. And then I'd send it out to supervisors or send it out to the other little kind of like reps and stuff. And it just kind of became a snowball effect where it launched kind of a little business, more or less.
Well, it's cool to be in a situation where you have a network of contacts so that if you do something, you do have somebody to send it to and check this out. I mean, we do that on an independent music level, but often when you're starting, you're just sending it to your friends,
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, that's the one thing that I really loved about LA, living there and it being a really good place for me. Maybe it still is. I don't know. I'm back here. This city is really exciting right now, but I just met a lot of people that would listen to my music. And I would say, I think a lot of them, I'll be honest, I think a lot of them liked me because I was just nice. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm from the South and I'm overly polite. But yeah, and then, from there, Vinyl Pinups, we had this song Gold Rays that we wrote that was like, hey, let's write the shortest, hookiest thing we can write. Do you need to? No? Okay. Let's write the shortest, hookiest thing that we can write that's relentless and like not really hard to figure out. Just easy and make it sound cool. Let's make it sound real indie and whatever. And that was the song Gold Rays, which kind of went kind of crazy. You know?
We got that in the discography and the
in the playlist.
Yeah, in the playlist, Rockstars. So scroll down, you can click over to that and check it out. And that particular track has a great quality to it of starting with like big stereo acoustic guitars, and then it's like the loop and the beat is happening in the middle. So talk a little bit about the production of that one.
Yeah, that was again, that was like an exercise in like how fast can we do this? And so, you know, I was in Logic at the time, and I just had that thing on cycle mode, and I did the acoustic guitar pass, and then it looped back around and did the other acoustic guitar pass. I think I had like, you know, the kick drum just blasting through it.
Oh, so that's one of the things I was going to ask you was a smart way to get a tight wall of guitars like that. And it sounds like that's like the loop mode means you haven't changed anything. You're just still strumming. You're still in the zone. The sound is the same. I really believe in like with acoustics, especially, I think that, you know, you can do it any way you want. With the song that we're writing as we go, I might just loop the section. And in you know, Pro Tools, you can set it up to playlist, and Logic will playlist. I'm pretty sure there's a way you can do it in Ableton now as well. But you just set it up, and you get you needed something to play to. Hopefully it's not a click track, so I'll put a drum. Well, we could just loop Doobie the barking dog next door outside the podcast
I know,
studio.
Seriously.
I'm going to sick Podzilla on you, Doobie, pretty soon here.
Row. So anyway, I'd get a drum going, and then I just start playing acoustic. And when you're playing acoustic, you got to get going. You know what I mean? It'd take you a couple takes, but then you're in it.
Yeah.
And so for that particular one, I just looped it probably 3 or 4 times.
Adam Audio proudly announces the D3V active desktop monitors and H200 dynamic closed-back studio headphones, designed in Berlin for pro-level monitoring in home studios. The D3V features 3.5-inch woofers with ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact design ideal for songwriters and producers. The D3V includes USB-C and balanced analog inputs, a headphone output, and DSP room acoustics. The H200 closed-back headphones feature powerful 32-ohm drivers and comfortable ear pads in a durable metal construction, making them perfect for studio or portable use. The included plug-in enhances tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot at adamaudio.com. At Isotope, saturation just got a whole lot smarter. Introducing the new Isotope Plasma plugin to supercharge your sound by giving your tracks exactly what they need, precisely when and where they need it. Unlike traditional saturators that apply a static effect, Plasma's groundbreaking flux saturation technology analyzes your sound and applies dynamic processing, adding targeted warmth, depth, and character to bring out the best in your mixes and masters. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the new Plasma or any of the awesome plugins at isotope.com. So let's break this down a little bit because it is really a great tip. So the thinking is you've got a drum loop, maybe it's 1 bar or 2 bars or something like that, or is it longer than that? I guess it's however, whatever the chord vibe
bars.
is.
Yeah.
4 to 8 bars. So that's looping and you're jamming along to it. And then the playlist feature means that each loop is going to be on its own playlist. I guess you can stitch it back together or edit it as one long file if you need to later. Pro Tools will let you unravel it that way. But the beauty of it is you can just flip between these playlists until you stumble on one that just feels like a really great loop.
Right, exactly. And 9 times out of 10 too, if you've run like 5 of them and you're in it, you'll have your doubles right there.
Right.
So you just take the other one, you might put it down on another track, you know, pan them far left and right and call it a day.
Have you, post that experience, have you adopted like Ableton Live as a solution for that kind of stuff?
I don't use Ableton that way. I do use Ableton a lot. In a different kind of way. I use it in the whatever the long mode is,
Yeah, I can't remember what we called it.
Yeah.
Things, clips and tracks or something.
Yeah. When I do
Lanes.
Ableton, it just looks like Pro Tools.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like it's the same idea. I think the thing with acoustic, obviously we all know it's all about the feel, and man, like especially as you're writing a song, you're not in it yet. You're trying to get yourself into that song, and so you kind of need to loop it until you're really like feeling it. If you've written this song and then you've listened to it a bunch and you're in the studio with some musicians and you've run a few takes of that, that's a different story. That's where it's like, okay, run it down top to bottom. And specifically, don't copy and paste acoustics. It's like because something needs to subtly change over time. But with Gold Rays, that's how it was. It was like, yeah, we're doing this modern style, and we're just gonna swipe through this thing. So I got a couple good feeling acoustic tracks, flew them around, and then started working on the drums. I was really like into 80s drum machine type sounds, but I was also into like creative drum programming with like, off beats on, like ghost notes happening on a kick drum, with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, okay, let's kind of do that, but let's also not make it sound too dancey or too, good. I don't know. That's like a terrible way to say it, but it needed to sound kind of cool and more drum machine-y.
Yeah.
So we did the acoustics, then it did the drum machine, and then I was like, well, it needs a bass sound. Did the bass sound.
So the acoustics, so you kind of almost start with the acoustics, or no, you need some sort of beat. You got to play off something.
Dude,
right?
I just did a 4 on the floor thing.
Yeah.
And what I would do now is I would speed it up and slow it down. But at the time I was like, yeah, it feels fine. So it's like, this is the tempo.
You mean like you'd loop it and then you'd test it at a little faster tempo, test it a little slower, make sure you're in the best tempo for the
I would go back. If I was doing it now, I would go like, okay, well, let's see if it doesn't need to be a little faster, a little slower. But back then I was just like, I don't know, run it.
Yeah.
Feels fine.
Well, it's true. I mean, there's so many times I've done song sketches and demos, and then I come back later, I'm like, good God, that's so dragging and slow.
I write everything too slow. I always have to speed it up. I probably would still, if I did go back and did Gold Rays now, I'd probably still speed it up because it's still probably a little slow. But it worked.
Pretty good. Feels pretty good. All right, so let me flip to a total other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
James Bay, Songs for My Love. That track.
That wasn't the one that I worked on.
It wasn't.
No,
okay.
I worked on Right Now with Dave Cobb, and that was a long. Oh,
I might have just, Right Now is the one. Sorry, that was the album title.
That was the album. Okay,
That's
Right Now was the song. So this was really interesting during the pandemic. Everybody's locked down, and I've known Dave Cobb for a long time. He produced 1,000 Horses. He produced all their hits. I met him the night that we got signed to Interscope, and he was just a badass, cool producer in Silver Lake. He'd produced Shooter Jennings and Jamie Johnson were his big records. He had produced a band called the Secret Sisters, who had been on Republic at the same time as me. So we had been kind of like skating around each other. But he was obviously like a genius with amazing taste in music and sounds and stuff. And then I moved to LA, he moved to Nashville, and we might have talked once every 2 years or so. I'd send him a congratulations on the Grammys kind of text, what I mean? Me and everybody else. Then he just became who he is. Now he really hit his stride here, and it was great that he moved here. And man, I worked on through the pandemic, everything was locked down, and that's just like, he's like, this isn't how I make records, He's used to being in a room with everybody. And so for whatever reason, the Horses, they called and they said, well, Brennan will put all the files together for you. So I did one song with him, and we were on, and we were just FaceTiming and catching up on things. He's like, do you want to do more of this? I was like, yes, David, I would love to work on your records. You know what I mean? So he was like, cause this is, kind of tough for me. And I said, okay, well, so over the course of the next like 4 months, everybody's locked down. And so not only is he going, oh my God, we're doing all this remote recording, but But he's also at the time starting to get looks, from big pop artists. He's doing records with Sam Smith and James and like these other guys that the label is like, hey, we're going to pop radio with these things. And so for Dave, they're like, okay, well, we want programmed drums. Dave's like, well, I can kind of do that. I can do that, but I don't like it. You know what I mean? And I certainly don't like working remote. So he just started kind of calling me in on things and having me just do random stuff, on records that, and the James Bay one was, it was a bruiser because David had done this awesome, he was thinking like More Than Words type, just acoustic track, right? This acoustic, beautiful love song. James, great vocalist, great singer. And Dave said, hey, the label wants drums, but I don't know how to put drums on it. He's like, everything I've tried doesn't sound good. It sounded great, but it wasn't working. You know what I mean? Like, and they're looking for like this more of like kind of an Ed Sheeran type thing. And, I know that's kind of like what you do. So do you want to come in on this? I'm like, sure, I can program drums. I got this. And man, we spent a week and a half on about 1,000 different ideas for how to make this track not lose what it had, but also be more kind of like pop. And working with Ben Adelson, who was like, not right yet. Oh, the snare drum's not right yet. It was like intense.
It's like, funny that you say that because it didn't sound like your productions in general. One of my questions is like, are we hearing, programmed drums or real drums?
Yeah.
You do a great job of
Thank you.
keeping it real. And on that particular song, the reason I brought it up is because the opposite of just looping those kind of jammy acoustics, this feels much more like it feels like James playing acoustic and singing together,
Yeah, well, that was the kind of the heart of the song. And everything that we were doing was coming back as almost too much, I probably have like 6 versions of that song. And it was always coming back as too much. And then we finally got it to a point to where it was almost like we had to like go do a bunch of stuff to find out that we didn't want to do any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up with a very simple kind of like strings and drums and, loops and kind of little things here and there, but it's very, very subtle. And then I sat with James on, Zoom for like 2 days going through, what about this idea? What about this idea? And there's like an organ in there that you can't even really hear, but it's in there,
Yeah.
And so at the end of all of it, then we sent it to Tom Elmhurst. And
did he mix it?
Yeah, he mixed it. And I've never in my life seen ninja mixing like that, because I told you, I was like, I know this track inside and out. And I don't know how he made any of those sounds sound like that. I could tell he didn't replace them, but it was just the way where everything was placed was so intentional and different. And it ended up being, very simple track, but it was a hell of a process.
Yeah. So my notes on that, well, the first part was, how did you record this, which you were talking about. So that's great. And then my takeaway was there's a quality to all the sounds that is in your face, but not, but it's not competing with the vocal in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the vocal has the air and the top on it, and the other instruments all sort of come together to have this quality. Like they work together, but it's almost like there's a slight filter over the entire band that just sets it one, a few steps behind the singer's voice.
There's a front to back thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think that I started to pick that up in LA years back. I noticed it with this artist Banks. She was on the come up, and it was like her whole track, her and a lot of the Lord stuff, it's like everything sat behind her. The drums were not bright, but they were there. And a lot of the sounds all had the top end brought off, so that all the top end and the excitement from the tracks coming from the vocal.
Yeah.
And that became, I remember hearing that in her, I remember hearing that in Lord. And then most notably when Billie Eilish popped out, that became the standard, which is like, if you've got a vocalist, there is this really neat, complex track that is super dark and filtered off behind them. You know what I mean? And like, again, like, you know, it was a really neat kind of evolution of how to present music.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
like, that's what the low pass filter is for.
Right. It's, well, and
that's why, like, you're so how many times would you be like, why would I ever use a high shelf cut, you know, or a low pass filter? Why would I take top off?
Well, and how to do it musically too. If we want to get into the nerddom of it all, it's like, I mean, the way to do that well is always start with like SSL channels and do it with that high pass.
Yeah.
Not a Pro Q necessarily. You know what I mean? Do something, or Pultex, you know, attenuate the top end, because that's where all the cool kind of like, okay, it's doing the thing, but it's not so surgical sounding, you know, and it feels a little bit more still glued together.
Yeah, it feels like a musical effect on.
Yeah. And that's where you can get real nerdy and going like, which high pass filter do I want to use? You know, sometimes it doesn't matter, but it's always worth trying, you know, some of the cooler ways to do that. One way that that I learned that I really loved, that I've done on a lot of things, is darkening something with Filter Freak, Echo Boy. So instead, because they have those output like styles that all sound really cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so certain ones, if it's like, okay, well, if we're going to do a 6 dB or 12 dB high pass, let's try, and if this is kind of a cool track and we have the room to be a little weird, like let's try it with the Filter Freak, or let's try it with a decapitator, you know, turn the high cut down on that, rather than being like pull up Pro Q, or, you know, Pro Q, or what's the other
Not trying to be transparent.
Yeah. Like being like, what would we do with a piece of hardware? And sometimes that just ends up sounding a little cooler, you know?
Empirical Labs, creators of the iconic Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio professionals. The Fatso, or Full Analog Tape Simulator and Optimizer, brings the warmth of vintage tape and tube electronics to your digital recordings. Perfect for mixes, masters, or overdubs by adding harmonic generation, high-frequency saturation, tape emulation, and compression. The impressive new Pump, a 500 series classic knee compressor, shares its DNA with the analog Distressor and Arouser plugin. It features 8 selectable compression ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, a high-pass filter, and a first-time ever attack mod for added transient control, which is ideal for adding more snap to your snare drum. All Empirical Labs products are hand-assembled and tested right down to the circuit boards in northern New Jersey, USA, for durability and performance, designed to last and be easily updated. Go to empiricallabs.com to find the Arouser and Big Freak plugins, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Remember to follow @Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Elevate your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your creative vision to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, crafting deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with unique sound design, Complete 15 has got you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound even further. Then, polish off your mixes with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11, included in the Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Brennan Aerts, joining us here at Podtastic Studios.
Podzilla.
Podzilla. Podiatrist.
Oh, I like that one.
I don't know. Do we really, though? I mean,
I don't know.
Sounds sort of like who wants to touch people's feet?
I don't know. People do.
People do. I mean, I'm barefoot right now.
Yeah, I should be.
You ready to jam?
Yeah, let's talk.
Speaking of toes.
Yeah.
So do you like to do a lot of the programming yourself when it comes to beats and loops and stuff like that? Because a lot of the music in your discography has, some sort of great drum beat element that feels good. There's a dance element to your productions, although it's not necessarily super intensive, like high end, club stuff. It's
right.
It's sort of like, it's like upbeat pop that would accompany something really well and set a mood and a setting too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, when I momentarily kind of like didn't care about guitar anymore, I was really obsessed with drum programming, which is hilarious. But, as a real art for a long time, especially like pre-Splice, when I really got into it, 2012, 2013, there was no Splice, and I was just studying Dr. Luke and studying Max Martin. Max Martin notoriously is like this incredible drum programmer, and I was just studying the things that he'd do. Yeah. And, all the, like, at the time, the Bruno Mars records, like if you listen to the drum programming on a lot of those early records, you're like, God, this is so smart.
And Max was Britney Spears and stuff too.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Everything. I mean,
I heard great stories about one of the stories I heard was that he would demo out a track and he'd go in there and he'd sing all the parts that he wanted the artist to sing, so that when they came in, literally it was like, okay, just replace that one, replace this phrase.
Dude, he could change his voice. He would sing. He created the oh baby baby. Like he did that. He was like, this is because he kind of, he knew how she sang. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then he went in there and sang it, and it sounded like that. I think you can find some of that.
Yeah. I can't even do that.
Yeah. But again, like, at the time, he was coming up on doing that. He was working on the 1989 record. He had mentored Dr. Luke, who had done all the, the Katy Perry record at the time and all this stuff. So as I was getting into pop music and really interested in pop music, it was all these, Swedish guys and rock guys that were making pop music. So I was paying attention to them more than anything.
Well, they couldn't leave the house. It was freezing cold. It was like minus 1,000 degrees where they are.
That's why they, and it's dark. It's forever.
Dark. What else are you going to do?
Yeah. So anyway, the point is like, yeah, I got really into drum programming, and I can't play drums at all, but coming from kind of a rock background and then being really interested in a lot of the kind of indie dance stuff, that happened in the early aughts, the Justice and the LCD Sound System and those kind of things, which were essentially rock bands making dance music. Mm-hmm. Like that just was always where my head was with regards to making, okay, it's got to dance a little bit, but it also can't sound like I'm not a DJ, I'm like a guitar player. So
it should feel like what the drums might have done in a band.
Right. And kind of like, and even the drum sounds should be maybe layered with like real drum sounds, but it's okay if it doesn't sound like a drummer. It's just kind of a, like a sound.
So
like
what were some of the first ways to go down that road and explore this stuff? And like, if you were telling somebody, if they wanted to do something like that,
man,
where would you start them off?
It's really hard because nowadays, Splice is fantastic, and they have everything at your fingertips from loops to one shots. And I have no problem using any and all those. I think that philosophically now you need to approach things by going, how do I kind of put a fingerprint on it? Like Timbaland had a drum sound, like, that's a Timbaland beat, and the tone of a certain record is very dependent on the decisions that you make with the drum sounds, big time. And I really believe, Tame Impala, like that is a sonic footprint, and now everybody kind of wants, they'll kind of try and sound like that. It's not that they can't make it, but I think for young producers, focus on groove and focus on being unique. Don't just pull loops from Splice, pull loops and study them maybe, but also kind of really create like, who am I? What is the story behind it sounds silly, but like, what's the story behind why my drums sound this way?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, and that's always been, maybe a challenge with the digital programming library approach, because, when you probably this was probably part of your drum stuff, was using drum machines and getting them into the computer. And then at least when you did that, you had a chance to run the drum machines through certain preamp or compressor and kind of freak it out a little bit and then capture that. So you might have been starting with something that had a sound to it or whatever.
Yeah, the gremlins.
But then when you're totally in the box and the samples are starting there off splice too, then it's like, I guess you start to learn to sculpt the sound with plugins and everything, but maybe you come up with your own combos of things and recreate them.
Yeah, totally. I rarely use just like a sample, from, if I'm pulling from splice, like a lot of times I'll go, oh, I like the top end of that one, or I like the low end of this one, or I like how this sounds with none of the low end in it, or whatever. Or, instead of a crash cymbal, I'm going to use a wood block with a ton of reverb that goes, and that will make the top of the chorus hit, but not in an obvious way. It's kind of all about going through and treating it like its own. It's not just there to hold down the groove anymore. It's there to kind of say something.
Yeah, make a statement,
create an aesthetic. So
yeah. So I dig it. So partly it's like learning how to recreate a new expression out of these source sounds that you're working with. Like the wood block and the reverb, you end up with something that's not what you started with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, of course, I grew up listening to so much Trent Reznor stuff, and he was the king of like, here's a drum machine, but here it is effed up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
totally.
Here's, or 40, Noah Shabib, who did a lot of the early Drake stuff, was famous for like all his drums, they sounded like real dark, and it wasn't a high pass filter. It was like I think he downsampled them, and that was like his way to go like, well, this is kind of now this has a footprint, or now I'm thinking of it in a different way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm fascinated with the real art of that drum programming, that culture, I guess you might say. That I don't know if it still exists or not. It does in my head.
Well, so if you were doing something, if you were about to start a record today, do you have a process that you might begin to have a dialogue about like the direction you want to go with it? And maybe record is not even a fair question since everything's so sort of single focused.
I like to, when I'm working with artists now, because I've been the last few years working directly with artists a lot more, which is funny. It's like that's what I set out to do in the first place. And I just kind of went off on a couple other paths for a while, but now they'll let me touch their records. But like, I always sit there and I want, not only do I want to know who they are, but I really want to know what they're listening to. I want to know if they say this is a little dark, is it because, they're listening to Deadmau5, Well, no wonder. Yeah. Like, okay, this is going to sound really dark. Is this a little, is this not upbeat enough? Well, are they listening to a lot of like neo-funk kind of disco stuff? Or are they listening to, bedroom pop that is, 90 BPM instead of 80? I like to get inside their head and go like, yo, we're not necessarily like copying anybody's records, but I need to know what's in your head. I need to know what you're into. And so I'll usually have like artists, make me a playlist of what they're currently into, make me a playlist of what inspires them. And then I can get it kind of an idea of like what the sonic footprint is going to be. I'm to the point now to where, again, you can hear my stuff. It has kind of like a certain tastes to it. And I have a lot of stuff that is coming out this year that has a very specific taste to it. That's a lot more rock, indie, indie pop kind of stuff.
And you're getting ready to go back into, writer strikes over, I think you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So therefore, here comes the wave of sync.
Yeah. We're definitely trying to, God bless, we don't need one more lifetime event. But, at the end of last year, it was like, okay, well, I'm working on artist records and I'm writing. I'm in my like third term of my publishing deal now. So I'm kind of just delivering a lot of stuff to them, but also going like, hey, we still have this other business that is really bread and butter, and we need to get it going. So now the writer strike is over and they're filming, I have some songs that I've done specifically for certain television shows that I can't talk about right now, but like it's like part of the script, and it's like they're not even shooting. They're shooting like right now. So like it's okay, that's in the fall. And you know, all these ads and all these companies and a lot of these television shows that were like maybe halfway done and they got to be, you know, they got halted by the strike and stuff. Everybody's on the hustle. It's like this, like, let's get this stuff going.
Right,
Let's get it out. So, you know, for right now, it's been a lot of how can we deliver something new to them that is kind of fresh, you know?
Well, none of them are delivering Doobie the Barking Dog on all their tracks.
They're not.
So,
they're not. But
again, Rockstars, we don't really know whether you'll hear this or whether my mixing skills are so high level. That
no, man, this is my sonic footprint. This is my sound, man. Haven't you heard?
So as you look for sonic footprints now, just pick one. What would be a fun one to do on a next project? Like, what would be a fun treatment for the drums to give it a bit of a sonic footprint?
You know, man.
And is it a sonic footprint or a sonic thumbprint?
Yeah, it's a great. Ooh, good question. You know what?
Or is it a sonic foot thumb?
I'm working with this band, Wild Love. They're really amazing, and we were doing. There's young indie rock kids, you know, and we were doing the drums. We were cutting the drums, you know, and you know, the guy I'm producing it with, the engineering it, he just pulls up these drum sounds. They sound like almost like Pearl Jam 10, almost a little like high snares and gated reverbs and stuff. And I was like, oh, are we doing that? And he said, dude, thuddy drums are for 30-year-olds. He goes, thuddy dry drums are for elder millennials, dude. And I was like, wow, okay. So I kind of took that and I said, okay, like I kind of want to start doing that. So I've been doing a lot of like kind of trying to do like more gated reverb type stuff, which I'm not the only one. It's, you know, plenty of people, you know, a little artist named Harry Styles did it too. So it's not like I'm the first one to do it, but I'm kind of trying to do the anti low fat thuddy thing and go more like kind of like atypical, you know, with like higher snare drums and
all right. So give us a quick, as long as it's not putting you on the spot, give us a quick tutorial on how we could put a gated verb sound together with the snare and get a cool thing.
There's a lot of obvious ways to do the quote correct ways to do it, you know, the correct way, you know, is to do what is it? Like a 224, maybe a Lexicon 224. And then, you know, gate it, you know, but the way that I've loved doing it lately, which is totally like neo, like, you know, cheap way to do it, is I love the way Valhalla Room sounds, and I just pull the decay way down, you know, and then I'll put it directly on the snare drum, pull it back, print it, and then chop the gate on the grid, which is
nice. So it's like you're just like screw figuring out how to do the gate thing. I'm just gonna chop it up into sounds.
Well, it depends too, you know, like you know, to me, I'm kind of like, this is a way for it to sound familiar but also kind of new, where it's just like gang, gang, you know, you're hearing if you gate it, it's a little off the grid, that's more correct, right? That's more like the typical sounds that we're used to hearing. But again, you know, for me, if I'm going, how can we make it sound familiar but a little different? That's how I would do it, you know, is I'd kind of go, okay, let's just put this thing directly on the snare drum and bounce it down.
Yeah, I like that. It reminds me of one of the first records I was doing, and we were actually at Smart Studios, and Garbage was probably recording upstairs with Butch Vig. So It was that time, you know, it was like rock band. Nobody had figured out how to make anything swing if you were programming. So everything was exactly on the grid, you know, for program drums. But we were also looking for different sounds. And I remember stumbling at one point, and we just had something, maybe it was a guitar or something, and I just clipped a bit of it and I placed it on the snare track, and all of a sudden we had this incredible snare. It was like,
that's so cool.
The dry snare hits, but the mega verb was just some other clip, you know, Pro Tools clip of some other instrument. Of course, we didn't call them clips back then. We called them Pro Tools regions.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because you have a very limited amount, you know.
Yeah.
They guess they changed clips to.
They just called them clips later.
That would be a Ableton.
So regions, I don't know, regions, and you know. Maybe there were maybe another piece of audio was called a municipality. I don't know.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the tools that are kind of fun to work with now when you're doing the programming and stuff. Like let's say we put down the guitar for a second. We're not doing guitar, even though there's probably lots to talk about in guitar world.
No,
But are you, do you like, grids of drum pads? Do you like MIDI keyboards? Do you like to just use a mouse? Like what are things that make it fun to make a beat?
I usually, if I'm doing drums, I will play in the kick and snare first and foremost and go, where's this? Where's the pulse?
But not on a real drum kit. There's not a real drum kit in the room necessarily.
No, not on a real drum kit. I might use like, addictive drums or something like that. It might be a real drum sound, but I kind of go through and go like, okay, let's get this kick snare thing going on. And then it might be like, okay, does that need a little bit of an extra thing going on? So maybe there's a certain sound clap or percussion accent on some of them, but not all of them. And then maybe there's a, spacey one on the fourth hit, so it's going to, if you're going boom, ga, boom, ga, boom, ga, boom, ga. Right. Okay. Now that's our kind of interesting thing. Now, what do the tops feel like? Okay. Well, it can be a hi-hat, it could be a tambourine, it could be a shaker, it could be whatever. What I love doing is going through and finding really organic loops, like any kind of like, I don't know, tribal loops or like, there's tons of like, there's Middle Eastern loops. There's like all kinds of different percussion type things.
And at this point, everything's sort of like playing in sync and you can just audition them and they're going to be lined up or something as you hear them.
Yeah. I mean, I usually...
Doesn't Splice work that way?
Splice is working that way now with Bridge. So sometimes I'll go into Ableton, I'll hook up Bridge and I'll just kind of run it through. But I also I don't know, I go through and just listen to it and go, does that have kind of a tone that I like? And then I might pull it into Pro Tools, stretch it out, make sure it's in time with the thing. And then I might change the groove of that loop to kind of feel a certain way. And then sometimes I'll go through and go, nah, I only want this beat of that loop or this beat of that loop, or I only want this sound from that loop. And so I'll kind of start putting the tasty stuff around it. A lot of things that I'll do is I'll take those loops, filter off the top end and turn them way down. And then they're just this kind of movement behind everything
underneath. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of this something's going on there, but it's not maybe way out in front. And then you put a hi-hat on it and it's like, okay, well, there's the drum kit. And then there's this weird rumbly thing that's grooving underneath it. So.
Yeah. Are you sick of searching for the right cable only to realize it doesn't even exist? Or maybe you're asking yourself, how in the world do I hook my studio up? Well, say goodbye to those headaches because Trace Audio can get you wired up right. Based in Nashville, but serving studios nationwide and around the world, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, labels, and wiring solutions. From labeling your patch bay to wiring your full studio or large format console, Trace Audio does it all, whether you're a home or pro studio owner. And the real game changer is Trace Audio's custom patch bay label designer. It's a one-stop tool to color code, organize, and design labels for your 1/4-inch or XLR patch bays. No more wondering where things are on your patch bay, when instead you can have sleek, professional labels that are easy to read and easy to use. Try the free online patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com and use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom labels and take your studio to the next level.
Did you know that one of the most common fears with audio mastering is not knowing if your mix is ready or not? Look, nobody wants to send a mix in for mastering only to realize there's some resonating low end that's going on that wasn't picked up in the mix. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. As soon as you send a mix for me to listen to, I'm already on your team. Mix feedback and master readiness is a service I offer for free and for good reason. That's because a great mix produces an even greater master. So if I can help you minimize oddities and issues and even provide some advice that will help your mix translate better, then mastering becomes more efficient and effective. And you don't stress about those issues at all. Just go to soundporter.com. There you can find videos, a FAQ, and a pre-mastering checklist process on my website that will explain a lot of what you need to know. When you're ready for great feedback, just reach out via my low-friction contact form and send me a mix to hear. Again, you can find me at soundporter.com.
Well, I mean, if you think about an actual drum set when it's recorded and mixed well, I mean, unless everything's sort of tight and gated, close mics, if there's some like, collective sound to it, usually there's a bunch of shuffliness between all the sounds of the drums, and that's what makes it sound like the groove.
Right. So like we're not, in this situation, we're not trying to sound like a real drum kit, but we're trying to sound familiar.
Yeah.
And understand kind of like, where is this kind of human element, going to come from?
So there's a new bit of software that I learned about when I was out at NAMM called, I don't want to say it wrong, XLN.
Drum Shaper?
No, Life.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that one yet.
And it's a dual, let me double check that so I'm not saying it wrong, but it's a dual software. So you've got an iOS from XLN Audio, and you've got it's a field recorder app for your
I have seen
iPhone.
That. Oh, I have seen that. It's so cool.
And so it's sort of simple. You could just be in a space where there's some interesting sounds, and then you just record 15 seconds of sounds, or you go around the kitchen bonking on some things. But what occurred to me is you could actually play samples and capture them in some weird location on your iPhone.
Dude,
and then it talks back to the plugin back in your session. And so when you go back to the studio, you just open the plugin and it's already like chopped them, sliced them and diced them for you. And, like thrown them into a beat. You may or may not like the beat that it made for you, but
but it gets you started.
But just having like them on keys for sliced and diced, that stuff's really kind of fun, or it's intriguing as a way to create, I think.
It's so fresh, and it is a simpler way that to do something that's kind of been done for a while by heady guys, it makes it more approachable. And I think any kind of tool that you have that can keep you moving, not get bogged down, not squinting at the screen too much, anything that does that is a win for me, because it's kind of all about, I say it all the time, it's like we're trying to connect to humanity, so anything that bogs us down in a computer can take away from that, So tools that kind of keep the momentum going and keep us going, oh, that feels good. I like that. Okay, cool. Keep going. Like that, they're, I don't know, absolutely necessary for us.
Are there some software synths and stuff like that you've gotten real excited about? Do you mess around with Native Instruments Contact and these big sample library instruments?
Yeah. I love, my favorite instruments right now are Spitfire instruments. They're Spitfire, if you don't know who they are, they create composition stuff. So big giant orchestral libraries, and the company as a whole is massive. I mean, they have created so many products, and I love their products. I love a lot of what they've been doing lately, trying to kind of appeal to producers and stuff is really simple interface plugins. There is one that a lot of people use. It's their free thing. It's called Labs, and it's one of my favorite things to use. It's so inspiring, like instantly, and you don't even know. I mean, it's like you pull up a patch. It's like birds, But does you play a chord with birds? I don't know. I've never done that before, but it's cool sounding. You know? So I really like the Spitfire Labs a lot. They have a couple little. If you dig around, they have a couple little cool pieces. There's this girl, Alev Lenz, who released an instrument that was her whole, she called it an interactive record. So it's her whole record like sampled on the instrument, but sampled into instruments, like so you can play them,
Interesting.
If that makes sense at all. Like, so she'll have
do you
some
listen
kind
to the
of
record, or does the record get delivered to you as samples?
Well, you can listen to the record, but then the instrument came with it. So it's got
a cool
like
idea.
It's so cool. It's really hard to explain, but once you see it, you're like, oh, I get it. Like it was a really interesting thing. That's an amazing instrument.
Well, I remember 9 Inch Nails, delivering one of their albums is multi-tracks that you could load right into a GarageBand session.
Yes.
And you'd play it and you're like, this sounds amazing. And then, of course, the first thought back then was like, wow, can you really make a record sound like this out of GarageBand? And then you realize, well, you can if you start out with exactly the right pre-mixed bits that
totally
mix together at zero for a perfect mix.
There's an amazing producer in LA he goes by Snakes of Russia that you should look up. And he I got hip to him through a mutual friend, and he created an instrument. I can't remember the company name off the top of my head. Their instruments are really incredible. If you just look up Snakes of Russia synth, you can find what the company is. And all of their stuff is super fresh and dense. And the interfaces are really incredible. So I really find out who that is.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. It looks like I'm on the band webpage, so it's not helping us out
the
much.
The synth is called Tenebrae, Tenebrae.
All right, dig it.
Yeah,
well, it's fun to discover all these things.
It's pretty great. That's the fresh stuff. Everything else is stuff everybody has,
Yeah. So, but you would have a MIDI controller. That would be like a standard thing for you.
Absolutely.
Do you like to have like a separate little drum pad with the 16 pads on it and sequencing?
I do it all on the piano, man.
Do you really?
Yeah, there's some pretty standardized for drums. There's pretty standardized understanding of where everything goes.
Right. Yeah. There's like kicks and snares show up on C and D or something like that.
Yeah. There's your kicks, snares, and claps.
Where's the hat? Is it usually like a F?
The hats are usually in the sharps.
Yeah, E sharp.
So it's
F flat.
Yeah. So it would be.
Am I saying that right? No, sorry, F sharp.
It'd be F sharp. Yeah,
I just said E sharp, F flat.
Yeah, got me too. It's late. No, the F sharp. Yeah, F sharp, G sharp. That's where your hi-hats usually are, and then your crashes are usually on C sharp and E flat.
Yeah.
So,
and I've known a lot of people who just learned how to finger drum on a keyboard.
Good
like
Lord,
Matt
man.
Mahaffey, that's his thing too. And
that shit is crazy. How those people do that? I can't do that stuff.
And like do fills and everything. I can't either. But so let's get out of the studio for a second.
Sure.
Let's talk about the iPhone. If you were out and about and you had your iPhone with you, are you an iPhone?
I'm an iPhone guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
got blue text messages.
Yeah. What might you be using from your iPhone to help you create or write or do any of those things?
The Moog app. I've used that on iPad. The Moog app is really great. I haven't messed with a lot of the other. I know that Logic is available on an iPad now. I know that I used to have a bunch of random little drum machines and stuff, but the Moog one is the one that's like, okay, we can do this.
But I mean, like, are you?
I don't have any form of DAW in my iPhone.
Okay, all right.
I would use voice memos.
Yeah, voice memos.
Yeah.
And it sounds really cool. I mean, we were talking about that recently about using it for the mic of choice to get a piano sound. Actually,
man, we used. I don't know. Do you know Jeff Duncan?
Not yet.
You will. He's an amazing producer. Yeah, he's awesome. And we did a song with him. This was a really cool way to try things. We were kind of trying that like run and gun style, and he'd go, okay, here it comes. You put headphones on. You're listening to the track, and Kara, my wife, is writing, and she's like, blah, 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 and she goes, okay, and he goes, oh, that's it. That's the melody, or that's the hook, or that's the lyric. Okay, so as the track's running in her headphones, he'll go, okay, 1, 2, 3, boom, and she'll sing, and he knows that at that point on the voice memo or whatever that it's on the grid, and so she can airdrop it to the computer, and then he just plop it in there, and it would always sound great. Like it was like, okay, maybe you could do a little EQ or whatever, but it always sounded really cool.
Yeah.
And like kind of different and whispery. It was real whispery and kind of close up sounding.
And there's, it's remarkable now with these auto cleanup features and stuff like, it's not a music making tool, but Descript is one you could use for podcasts. For example, you could record into it and it transcribes all the audio into text for you, and then you can edit the text and it edits the audio. But it also would have a feature in there where you're like, if somebody showed up on a crappy, like the crappiest laptop mic on an old Zoom channel, and then you just hit like mix that, and and a moment later it sounds like it's in a studio on a great mic, you know, and
Jeez,
you
man.
see Adobe doing things like that. So it's
called Descript.
Descript, yeah.
Okay.
But the reason I bring that up is because we'll find this in lots of places. But the point is that like you will be able to record on an iPhone and then just send the idea over and then hit a button, and it's going to convert it to sound more like you were on like a big studio mic.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a fun way to create where, again, it's like if you can get the tech out of our way so that you're really focusing on the fun stuff, then it's just bringing it all right back to the porch again.
Yeah. There's something cool about that. That's like, they call it asynchronistic work. Have you heard of this? You know?
No, tell us about that.
It's basically like, I don't know, it's probably some entrepreneur stuff, but it's like, it's basically like that, you know, certain people have found that like a lot of times humans can be more effective if they're just kind of like running in and do something real quick and then go do something else. Do something instead of like getting too like, I got to focus and grind, right? So in the music world, what that would mean is kind of going like, hey, let's write what we have done a lot with people lately is almost an experiment, and it's amazing what comes out of it is, hey, here's a verse idea, blah, 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 blah. Okay, send it over. And then they're kind of doing stuff and you go out to lunch or whatever. And then they come back and they go like, hey, what about this? What about that? And you're kind of over the course of, there was a song that we did with a friend of mine named Chris Cernell. And we did the entire song from scratch, wrote, recorded, mixed, and mastered in about 24 total hours. And it was like, that would have taken us 3 weeks if we were sitting in a session, like kind of trying to figure it out. But we were literally doing it in between flights and in between picking kids up from school and whatever, you know. And I'd run in real quick and go like, hey, here's some drums or here's some guitars, you know. And it was just a really neat way to create. And there's a lot of people that are on that right now, trying, you know, the new ways.
Yeah, so I agree that making things happen in short bursts can be a really effective way to work too. It reminds me, for some reason, of the game where you fold up a piece of paper. Well, one game where maybe you let people know the last word of a sentence that you wrote, and then they have to write another sentence.
Wow.
No, you let them know the last word, and then they write another one, and then you unravel it at the end, and you're like, look at this crazy poem we came up with.
Oh, that's
or
fun.
Like the drawing where you draw, you know, the feet up to the hips, and then you fold the paper so they can't see it, and then you just draw where like the legs are, so then they continue, and you'd like get people to draw a thing together.
Yeah,
I guess that's sort of like blind, so that's not exactly the same thing.
No, that's actually pretty close though. It's definitely a similar idea.
Yeah,
sure.
but working quickly is a great way to create, and it's one of the things I love about song sketching. Is giving myself an hour or two, and I'm just going to write a song out of this thing.
Yeah,
I've been doing this thing with my buddies called poetry scores, where like I don't have to worry about the lyrics. All I got to do is take the poem, steal some good lines, compose something. But I usually in those situations, I know that it will end up in the studio with the band later, like redoing it.
Yeah.
In your case, did you guys find there were clever ways? Did you have to fight the urge to want to redo it and call it a demo?
Which song? Anything?
The asynchronous work that
No, ironically it was that was unique in that way, that it was like, wow, this really came together. Now, here's something that speaking of demos, something now that's really interesting is that it's really hard to it's really hard, you know, I'm almost 39 now, and I've been making recordings since I was 14 because I had an in-home studio, you know. So I've put in a lot of hours, you know, making records. And it's really interesting because I know how long it used to take, and it doesn't take that long anymore. And it's hard. It's a real exercise. What you have to exercise is that maybe all that work paid off. And maybe there's a lot of kind of menial little tasks that you don't need to do anymore because you've kind of graduated past that. So like sometimes there just isn't a demo. It's just like it's not that you get it right first, but you're making good decisions along the way because, you know, the people that, especially if you're working with really seasoned professionals and stuff, like you can never take for granted the amount of work that it's gone into being able to do this fast. And so so now I'm really trying to go like to not get too bogged down in like self-doubt and second guessing, and just kind of go like, I know when it's not working, but I don't think of things like a demo anymore. I don't go like, we need to go re-record this.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks or mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, referencing a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Atom Audio is proud to announce the new D3V active desktop monitor system and H200 dynamic closeback studio headphones designed in Berlin and perfect for pro-level monitoring in a home studio setting. The D3V is a fully active desktop monitoring system featuring 3.5-inch woofers and hand-folded ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact form in elegant white or black finish. It's perfect for songwriters, producers, podcasters, and mixers with digital input over USB-C or balanced analog inputs, and includes a headphone output and DSP room acoustic switches. The H200 is Atom Audio's new closed-back studio headphone featuring 40mm peak drivers and memory foam ear pads in a durable metal construction with a detachable main cable for dual-sided connectivity, making the H200s reliable for demanding studio use. With an impedance of just 32 ohms, they will sound great with your studio or laptop and include a plugin for enhanced tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot. To see the new D3V monitors and H200 headphones, go to atomaudio.com. Would you say that it's still, you like to go into a session like that with something at a time? Like, do you find that you can still go in even if you don't have a song yet and get there?
Yeah.
I kind of know the answer already because you've been writing all these sync tracks. So obviously
I can work pretty fast.
You got to get it done like before lunch.
Yeah. I can get something pretty quick if I know where we're going, you know. I don't know that it'll always be the best thing I ever wrote, but it'll be good, right? It's like, okay, this will be fine. And who knows?
Like, that's kind of part of the answer, is just like, at least have something you're starting with.
Like,
let's go in this direction.
Yeah, totally. If not having a direction is certainly where you sit in a room staring at each other for hours on end.
Yeah. It's like if you put everybody in a rowboat with oars and everybody starts rowing in different directions, you're not going anywhere at all.
Right. And you find this too with like really, you know, I don't want to sound this way, but like I'm a little pickier about the artists that I work with because in order for us to work efficiently, like you kind of need to like have an idea of who you are or what you want to accomplish, or, you know, my job is to help you get there, you know, guide you how to get there. I can't tell you what to say. I can
can't tell you who to be.
Right. And in the music industry, it's a fame industry, and there's a lot of people who just want to be famous, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. I'm not good at working with those people because I'm not good at being famous. So I don't know I can tell you how to be famous, or I can tell you how to make a record, but like I'm mostly more about like I can help you as an artist get to where you want to be and accomplish what you want to accomplish with the product, the output of the music and the art. Yeah. And that is like, I had a girl one time, amazing singer. She's becoming very successful. I mean, like she's definitely a really she's a happening artist, man. Like, and she's really good. And but she's not a strong writer, really. And she just naturally is. She's a great singer. She's a great entertainer. And she has a great attitude, and she's great to be around. But, you know, we were sitting there and she was kind of like, I have this idea for this song, and it's about, you know, seeing your boyfriend at a bar, or you're seeing your ex-boyfriend at a bar. And I'm like, well, okay, cool. So tell me about that. And it's just like silent. I'm like, well, and she's looking at me like, well, what would you sing? And I'm like, well, I have no idea what it's like to be a 18-year-old girl that saw my ex-boyfriend at a bar, you know? Like, what would I know about that? I need you to help me, and I can help you get there. And it was like, there was nothing wrong with it. But in that moment, I was just like, why? I don't know anything about that. And why should I? How pretentious, you know?
Right.
Like,
right.
And so certainly, I guess I'm off in the weeds now, but certainly like having some form of direction makes things go way faster.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're kind of staring at a wall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea of sitting down to write with a prompt or an intention, it's such a trip. You know, I don't get to do that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For me, having a friend hand me a poem, that's my prompt. It's like, turn this into something. When I'm done, I might listen to it and like all the music, but not know what the hell I just said.
Yeah.
But you know, writing, and I've done some writing with groups, and I've experienced, you know, sitting around for hours, three people just trying to figure out what to say. And it was like, you know, where nothing happened, and it was frustrating. But eventually, you know, we kind of worked through it too.
I think that that music, we have this idea now that everybody in music has to write. I mean, I just don't think that's a thing. I don't think everybody's a writer, you know? I think
it's a
that
skill set that takes a lot of practice.
It is. It's a skill set, and it's a personality type, man. Like, and I feel like I wrote my best songs probably in my 20s. And it's getting actually harder for me to write songs now, like writing the lyric, you know, writing what we're talking about, because, you know, I don't know, it's not really my thing right now. You know what I mean? So
what are some things that tend to work better than others? Like if you sit down and it feels like we're staring at a blank page, is that like a kiss of death to making something happen? Are there, does it help to like get up and walk around, move around the room?
Yeah.
Does it help to like
be
in a car? Does it help to?
Yeah, it helps to live life and talk about things. You know, I mean, I think what really can happen is when you're a professional songwriter, professional producer, you're not going out and doing a lot. You're working, and at least for me, you know, now I'm taking care of my family and
you're
stuff.
Like, I could write all about, you know, finding the right drum beat for this thing.
Right. I could write, what am I supposed to write about? My property taxes? That's what I dealt with today. You know, that's what's cool about, like, you know, these artists, that they need to kind of like live a little bit of a storied life and go experience things. And kind of the beauty of being an artist is that you see the world in a different way than other people, and you feel everything in a very different way than people. And so, like, if you just go out and live and go do things, you have something to talk about, you know, and you have you know, emotions to tap into and stuff.
Do you find artists that are bringing back a song idea to write, to work out in the studio with you, it's always like in the notes app on their phone, or do you have a lot of artists that are still like pencil and notebook?
Man, I wish they'd pencil and notebook. I love that. No, it's all notes. It's notes. A lot of people, you know, they come in with titles, or sometimes we sit there. I always, you know, say like, I'm actually like probably about 75% therapist and 25% producer, because you just want to sit down and talk to them. If we're writing for their record, you know, or if they have a half-written song, you know, we got to talk about what's going on here. You know, what's going on in your life. You know, and then we can kind of sometimes find something, and I can go, oh, I heard a quote the other day that was about this, or, you know what, that was a cool thing you just said. What if we said this? You know, so, you know, it's. I think that the best thing that can happen is for artists to be artists and live kind of storied lives while they're young, so they have something to talk about. You know,
I don't know what your role was in this particular one, but find me Christina Grimmie.
Oh yeah,
or that's
old. Yeah, Grimmie. That's very old.
That's a very old one. Yeah,
very,
great dance pop and great vocals on that.
Thank you.
Was that something that there was a writing process too, or is this more of a production?
No,
process?
That was a writing process. That was I was still very early. I mean, that's very That's early stuff, man. That was a long time. That was in my apartment in Nashville on my iMac with my cracked plugins. That was before I even moved to LA, you know. But Christina was a beautiful young girl that she was a YouTuber, and she had a lot of she had crazy subscribers, and she got really big doing covers. And so she wanted to start making her own records, and through a series of just industry connections, we got to know each other, and she came to Nashville, and that was a situation where it was like those tracks were her talking about like how she felt about her life, and she's so young, and we were still, me and my wife Kara did those songs together, and it's like we were still very young, and we were kind of like, oh yeah, I remember how it was to feel that way or this way, and she and Christina was a great singer, and she was great at like making records in a bedroom, apartment off of Woodmont Boulevard. Like she was not a diva like that. Like she didn't have any kind of idea about, she was a grinder, And yeah, we made those records, and then we made another one. She moved to LA right before we moved to LA, so we made one more track with her while we lived there. It was really good as well. So,
right on.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on the finish line here, so let me jump into some fast-paced questions, and you just kind of hit back with any of these.
Okay.
I call these sort of the jam session questions.
Got it.
When you started out in recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
A band to record.
A band to record, right? Because you had all the stuff, but you're like, who's going to let?
I could never find musicians that wanted to do it, So I was just did it all myself. But I still think that held me back, because I think if I could have found some dudes to like, be in a rock band and go do it, they would have been good.
I think it's good advice. I mean, I find now that I've been recording more, even just taking this poetry score idea where I'm like, it gives me a chance to make something that I can play for somebody that's like, hey, this is a thing I made. Even it's with my buddies in a band, but sometimes just opening up that, like, I made this thing and playing it for somebody, I can see that people are interested in it, and it surprises me.
Collaborators, man, it's the key. You got to have people like that.
Whereas trying to tell somebody like, I have got an idea for what your band could be, is like,
yeah,
how far is that going to go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How about some of the best advice you remember receiving, or anything, any just good inspirational quote you heard from anybody?
I think that as producers, especially, like, this I have a friend that said it. I'm sure he got it from somewhere else, but if it sounds good, it is good.
Yeah,
and that is to say, there's no right or wrong to any of it. Like, I mean, the new Health record, it'll hurt your ears, but it's amazing. Like, and there's lots of people who will go like, oh, that's too, what did they do? You can't do that. Oh my God, listen to the digital distortion. That's intentional. That's what they wanted to do. And so if it sounds good, it is good. Sometimes if the vocal's over compressed, now it sounds interesting. I don't know. There's no, and I think that it's important for kids to not get too bogged down in like some correct way to do it. Well, turn that thing all the way up. Who cares? At one time, somebody did that with a Marshall, and we all worship them,
Yeah, right.
And that was wrong.
Feedback was supposed to be wrong.
Yeah. So if it sounds good, it is good. Lighting your guitar on fire
was supposed to be wrong.
Right. And
smashing your guitar on stage was supposed to be wrong.
Absolutely.
Although that's not specifically on a record.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
For 15 years, I owned a famous MCI console that came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made many Grammy-winning records in the 1970s, and it sounded amazing. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to full digital mixing, I decided to team up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new new MBSI plugin. This isn't just another boring plugin. The MBSI captures that same iconic sound that was used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, produced by Bill Szymczyk, Saturday Night Fever and Stayin' Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, and was loved by legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Szymczyk, to name just a few. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a high and low-pass filter switch. Features I always wished that the console had. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio, just like me. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound. Go to makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio using free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can use the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. It sounds good. It is good. I think sometimes the reminder for us is the important takeaway is make sure you're keeping your perspective so that you are aware when it sounds good.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the self-doubt is the killer for sounds good.
Oh, man. So well said. Yeah.
Give us another recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on their next session.
Something the rock stars could use on their
Anything
next
that comes to mind is good.
You know what I love? Direct guitar sounds. Do that. Just plug into a Neve or a Neve plugin and do it from there. Because
turn it up.
Turn it up.
So like even like the Shep 73 or whatever.
Yeah, anything.
I could just go direct in and just blast that and play guitar through it.
Yeah. Or turn it down. Or play it like small and not big sounding. Because it's a challenge, and if you commit yourself to doing that, it's really it helps you exercise the part of your brain that matters, which is the creative side, not getting bogged down in the sounds and the tones and all that stuff. I mean, we want stuff to sound good, but limit yourself a little bit, you know.
It's also a lot faster.
Yeah, it's way
guitar
faster
tone than micing up the amp.
Yeah.
And
the other piece of that would be like, hey, limit yourself. Make 5 songs, pick a synth, a guitar, and plug both of them into the Neve, and then you can get your drums from wherever. But just like kind of go, these are the sounds. Like if I need a pad, it needs to come from this. If I need a rock guitar, it needs to come from this. If I need a clean guitar, it needs to come from this. And instead of, and that challenge will just make you be more creative and get more tapped into kind of like decision making, and less decision paralysis, more commitment. And, you might not even love what comes out, but it's going to have a sound, and it's going to be committed, and it's going to challenge you.
All right, favorite hardware tool or something that you
favorite hardware tool?
Got. Yeah, some physical that really helps a session or a mix or a production.
Recording stuff.
Clothes don't necessarily count.
No. Favorite hardware tool right now, dude, I don't know. Probably just a good 1073 or a stereo pair.
You got a bandana scarf on. That's
I got one of
close,
these.
but
Yeah,
does
this
that
is
count?
from Flathead. This is from some guys, not including guitars and stuff. If you're talking
Whatever
about
you want. Whatever,
recording
it's just
hardware.
something that really you enjoy having around on a session.
Oh, well, I'll tell you this. This is a guitar though. It's my dad's 72 P bass. And it's a bass. It just shouldn't be anything. It should just be a bass. but it is so fun to play. It's fun to play as a guitar, like play it up high and play rock guitar with it. It's fun to play as a bass. It's fun to play as a rock bass, funk bass, whatever you want to do with it. It literally, it has such a tone, and it's also so versatile, and there's something about it, man. It's funny. My dad's name is Billy. We call it the Billy bass. And I swear to you, dude, I loan it out to people all the time.
And that's not the singing fish that hangs up on your wall.
That's the Billy Bass. No, it's a walnut brown 72p bass. And I swear to you, it is like, there's something about that thing. People are like, oh, sick. Yeah, you can just get going. I use that to write songs more than guitars these days.
So one of your songs, Roll, Vinyl Pinups, got this killer bass riff intro.
Yeah, that's that bass.
Is it that bass?
I think so. Pretty sure.
And then the other part of that question was, and you probably just answered it, which was, do you find virtual amps useful?
Oh, yeah. I think they're great.
Yeah.
I think I really like the Neural stuff, man. Like, I like the Neural DSP Tone King. I like the Mixwave Benson Chimera, which was, they didn't say it was built by Neural, but it feels like a Neural plugin, so I'm sure it was built by them. I really like, for bass, I like the Dark Glass. Okay, so the Dark Glass from Neural is meant for like metal, but it actually has amazing, big, clean, modern bass sound. And those are kind of the main ones that I stick with. I think the Tweed Deluxe from UAA is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Lately, I've been using. I'll tell you, if you ever get to the Desert Island plugin, the Galaxy Echo or Tape Echo, is I use it for everything, every single track. I use it for overdrive. I use it for reverb. I use it for delay. I use it on sends. I use it in front of amplifiers. I use it on everything. And it's just a plugin, but it sounds awesome.
Is that UAD or which one's that?
Yep. UAD. It's a Space Echo. It's 201.
Nice.
But I mean, dude, if, I don't have a Space Echo right now, which is a crime, but if I had one, that'd be my piece of hardware.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I did a lot of Space Echo records years ago when we had that in the studio, and it was a lot of fun to make everything sound like dub.
It's awesome.
At some point of the overdub.
It's so awesome.
Well, that kind of answers some of the favorite software tools stuff.
Okay.
So, how about a quick tip for the business side of things? You got anything, or like something online you like using that helps you?
But for the business side, I say meet everybody you can, make yourself valuable to others, be nice. The end.
I love it.
Seriously, because you just, you can make a lot more money being a dick somewhere else. Nobody wants it here. Yeah. So that's the way I see it. If you're getting into this business, hang out, go to as many things as you can. Don't say no to any opportunities, and find a way to make yourself valuable to others instead of looking for people who are going to be valuable to you.
Awesome. Well, you said that opened a lot of doors for you in LA. That's
why I learned to mix my own stuff, was because I was like, I didn't want to be a mixer. I was just like, I knew that I could deliver. I'd be like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? I can do it. I can do it right now at my house, you know, instead of going like, well, I'm awesome. Who's going to be my megaphone? It gives you longevity. It gives you a longer career. It keeps you humble. How can I serve somebody else in some way?
Yeah. Right on. All right. So this is our closing question. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You get to go back in time, find young Brennan, and say, listen, buddy, I've come back in time to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to become a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you want to go back and give yourself, if you could?
Have a bias to action and do it right away. Don't wait around if you want to move to if you want to move to LA. One of the biggest regrets I have was not moving when I was younger. Stayed in Nashville for a long time. Amazing town, but it wasn't for me at the time. To have a bias to action, go do it. If you want to make records, go do it. If you want to be in a band, go do it. Get in the van, go do it. If you want to, everything's at our fingertips now, and it's cheaper than ever to make records.
Yeah.
Just make them. If you want to be part of a scene or whatever, go to where that is.
Even though there's an internal voice telling you, I can't go do that. I got worry about this, that, or money or whatever.
Yeah, man. I worried about being an adult way too early, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
You got your whole life to be an adult. Like go, finish high school, I guess, and then go do it. Like school's always there, college's always there, job's always there. Family's always there. Like, well, hopefully, maybe not, but yeah. I mean, if you're 18 years old and you want to do this stuff, dude, you have everything at your fingertips now. I didn't, and I still should have done it.
Yeah.
So I say, don't overthink it, and don't spend any time trying to be, quote, responsible about it. This thing is a whack, like you need to just go be a wild man for a second, or woman.
What are you what do you need to tell yourself to go do, have a bias to go do right now? Other than end this podcast.
No.
For me, it's be more of an artist. Get out there, play shows.
Yeah.
Write songs. Do it. Finish my record.
Yeah. I think right now I need to, I need to actually do the opposite. I think I need to organize a bit more, meaning like I need to focus on right now. What I need to do is focus more on what's working and weed out what's not, because I have less time than I used to.
Yeah.
With my family now, and I have a lot, and I also a bias to action to really have. You have to shoot for the biggest of the biggest now, because it's the way you have to have really big ideas, and that means like it's kind of hard because. It's like you're sitting here, you started a podcast, and it's like, that's a big idea. That's a big jump.
Big idea.
It's
10 years later.
I'm just saying it's a big thing to do, and you have to have that if you want to. If I'm going to provide anything special for my family and set them up in any way, I can't be, kind of a small-time producer. Like
Can't be a dabbler?
No, I can't be a dabbler, and I can't be unfocused, and I can't be any of those things that you're allowed to be when you're younger.
From dabbler to doubler.
Yeah, exactly. Microshift. No, yeah, no. I mean, so I think that that's what I tell myself now is have big ideas and organize.
Right on.
Maybe the opposite of being punk, but
well, it's been awesome having you here on the show.
Dude, I've loved this, man. Thank you. Please
let the rock stars know, where can they go find out more about you?
I'm easy to get a hold of.
Connect with you. What if they got questions? What if they've got the next hit that just needs to be put out to the world? I'm the most accessible producer in the music industry. Instagram me, just friggin' Brennan Aerts, Aerts. Yep, I have a lovely following of about 1,100 people on there. You can send me anything you want on there, and I'll connect for email, phone numbers, whatever. You can even send me an email. I'm telling you, I'm kind of crazy like that. You know how Nike's got Air Jordans? Yeah. Well, Brennan's got Aerts. Yeah, Instagram, Brennan Aerts. Or you can contact us through birdnestinternational.com. It's got a little contact thing, so you can hit us through there as well. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, dude, thank you so much. Thank you. Rockstars, thank you for listening. And Brennan, I look forward to seeing you around the studio. Dude, rocking. All right, man. Cheers. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this show possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. At empiricallabs.com, use the code RSR10 for 10% off the Arouser and Big Freak plugins. And finally, use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom patch bay labels at traceaudio.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.